right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob, and here he is, undisclosed location, somewhere between New York and California. Jacob Prash, how you doing?
Greetings from Montana. I just disclosed it. Every blessing
Oh,
in
man.
All right.
You. Yeah. Greetings, Jacob. Welcome, brother. God bless you. And not too far from where you are, David Lister.
Yes, I'm right next door to him. So
Next door. Not
good
in
to be
Wyoming,
here.
but literally next door, right? Not in Wyoming.
Yeah.
But, okay, good. Down the street from my house, too far, not too far, a little bit further than where David is to Jacob. It's Jay. How you doing, Jay?
I'm having fun in the California sun.
Nice shirt. It reflects it.
Thank you.
Amen. And down under, Davey, you're ahead of us again Saturday. Catch up with you. How you doing this morning?
Doing pretty good, thanks. Yep.
All right, praise the Lord. God bless you guys. And so welcome those who are watching live on Catching Up with Jacob. We're on different platforms today, from Facebook to YouTube, which will eventually be leaving that over to Rumble and other platforms for backstage. But in the meantime, you get to watch us there. We do like for you to watch on Memorial.tv and memorialtv.org. That would be wonderful for us to know that you're watching there. Rumble's a very good platform, and they've been in the headlines. And we're going to talk about Rumble at the end of our episode here on Catching Up. You can also catch us on Vimeo. You can also catch us on Telegram, as well as RTN. And if I'm missing one, please forgive me. But I think those are all of them. So welcome those who are watching and those who are watching later. So we're so blessed to have you here. We praise the Lord for you. We pray for you guys, those who support and watch Moriel, as well as other channels like our Community Church of Devore channel, Devore Truth. Thank you guys for watching. And just before we get started, Jacob, you got a couple of announcements just to get everybody caught up on what's coming up after your visit here. You'll be in the UK and in Ireland as well. So let us know.
Yes, I'll be coming back to Britain, Lord willing, and then very quickly moving on to Ireland, both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. On the 2nd of November, I will be at Calvary Pentecostal Church with Pastor Peter Stephen Chumble in Newton Abbey, which is on the outskirts of Belfast. And then I'll be at Belfast on Orangefield Crescent at Agape Christian Fellowship with Pastor Marty Foster. That'll be on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. The times are all posted on the website. And then the 6th, we shall be in the Republic of Ireland, Holy Catholic Ireland in County Boyle. We'll be going to County Boyle this time. That will be posted very shortly. I hope you can join us there. Now, just concerning the British conference, the English-Welsh conference, we asked for more rooms and accommodations because we booked up and ran out of accommodation. It's a residential conference. Beryl did manage to get some more rooms, but those are basically gone. So while we were going to keep the bookings open until the 1st of October, we ran out of rooms. We got some more rooms, and now we're out of those as well. You might want to try Beryl if you're very lucky in case there's a cancellation, but basically the conference in England is filled up. That will be the 17th to the 19th of November. After that, we're off to India, Lord willing, but more of that in the future.
All right. Thank you, Jacob. And David Lister and I will be heading down to Australia, New Zealand at the end of the year. So we're glad to be there. And so if you're watching from Australia, New Zealand now or later, we're going to see you soon. So we do have the schedule somewhat. I think it's all ready to go or not, David, but I'll let you announce that when we visit you down under.
Yep, we're getting it together. What I can let you know at the moment, we'll be in Sydney November 4th and 5th, Saturday and Sunday, November 4th and 5th. On the Monday, November 6th, we'll be in Brisbane. Wednesday, November 8th, we'll be in Perth. We'll be in Melbourne Saturday and Sunday, November 11th and 12th. And then we'll be heading off to New Zealand. We'll be in New Zealand from Wednesday, November 15th through to Sunday, November 19th.
All right, good stuff. Well, can't wait to get there. Can't wait to be there. Not only with you, Ron, and all the brothers and sisters that are there. It'll be an awesome blessing. Plus, we've got our brother David Lister there. Visit some of the churches that are there. Some of the believers there. Will be a lot of fun. So we're looking forward to that. All right, I think that was all the announcements we have. So that was actually pretty fast. Podcast. Yes, Jay, let us know about podcast.
So if you haven't already listened to, we have always Catching Up with Jacob, but we also have Ken's Corner. And if you haven't heard any of the Exodus Bible studies that have gone up recently, they are excellent, as well as the study with Sandy on 1 John. 90% of our downloads are on Apple. You can find us on Apple. You can find us on Amazon, Podchasers, and just about anywhere you have a podcast download button, you can do it. So please make sure to download and listen to as many podcasts as you like.
Very good. Thank you. And podcast is always a great way to share all the Bible studies and all the wonderful episodes that we have and getting people to know Christ. And we'll add some more. We actually are in the works of trying to add some more of these episodes and new things, especially coming in the new year. So, all right, that's all we got for announcements. Jacob Prasch, let's get started and catching up with Jacob. We won't talk about New York City considering removing the statues of George Washington, among others, at the taxpayers' money because of all the crisis New York is suffering right now. And of course, they got a wonderful mayor, and he's got wonderful plans for New York. And they're spraying people, and with God knows what they're spraying. But there's a lot of stuff going on in New York. Put it that way. I guess they don't want the migrants there anymore as sanctuary city. So
they invited them. Now they say we don't want you after we invited you. Look, Adams, first of all, I've heard the man make statements that if a white person made those statements, they would be labeled as a racist by the media. So yes. I consider Adams to be a racist and an incompetent, but also he's a hypocrite.
Yeah, and it's interesting what happens in New York City. It's been a fascinating place to watch and see over the last 4 years. We actually know some believers that you obviously are going to be there at some point, Jacob. So what about the one we can't talk about the guy that got carjacked, the one that carjacked in his home, and we won't talk about that one, but that was a pretty creepy video of just how unsafe the world has become.
And this is Lake Tahoe.
Yeah.
A residential resort area, a very affluent area, but saturated with liberals. And we know how liberals vote. They get what they voted for. The gentleman who was hijacked, and I'm sorry he was hijacked and violently attacked, he said he doesn't believe in guns. Well, too bad. He might not have gotten hijacked and had two cars stolen, beaten to a pulp in his own garage. If he did believe in guns, if he had the means to defend himself, it might not have happened.
Yeah. And it is unbelievable that you're not even safe in your own garage in some of these cities. And obviously we've seen the implosion of some of these cities, liberal cities. And of course, we'll talk about the migrant crisis that's coming up because they're very happy with migrant crisis as long as it's not in their city, as New York and other cities like Chicago wants to. It's funny. They want to send them to Texas. They don't want to send them to the country of origin. They're very happy as long as they're just south of a certain line into Texas. So
in a red state, yes.
Yeah, it's crazy. Anyway, let's get on to the catching up. Jacob, NATO is fracturing. Poland announces they'll no longer arm Ukraine. The dam is breaking. The unified Western support of Ukraine is failing. Other countries are bailing out soon. They haven't announced it yet, but the corrupt Volodymyr Zelensky goes to the UN, asks for more money, speaks about climate change more than anything else, goes to the Senate, goes to Congress, I should say, asks for more money. Biden promises what he has already promised. Like he didn't get him a lot more money than this, but he goes and meets with JP Morgan to privatize his support for the war. It's a desperation right now. It's in free fall. His support has become very weak. Jacob, fill us in, not on the Russian. We'll talk about Russia in a minute, but just simply on the Ukraine aspect of it with Volodymyr coming in and asking for more money.
First of all, Ukraine was a corrupt country. You can say that Zelensky was the elected leader of that country as opposed to a illegitimately elected Putin, although Putin has a high approval rate even among his people now. One may make that argument. But let's remember, Ukraine was a corrupt country, easily as corrupt as Russia. That's why the Bidens had their fingers in it. That's why Biden's son was in it. It was a corrupt country. It was a place to do corrupt business. So Biden has certainly a family business interest in perpetuating it, but that's only scratching the surface. I don't agree with what Putin did. I think he's an aggressor. I always thought he was a neo-Stalinist. I don't believe there's any legitimacy to his claims on the areas of Ukraine that he wants to annex or has annexed to Russia, including Crimea. I don't like him. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with any of that. But let's not pretend that Zelensky is a nice man or an honest man, or that the government of Ukraine is somehow at the vanguard of Western democracy and righteousness. It's just not like that. It's a corrupt government. Remember, most NATO countries did not want Ukraine in NATO because of its corruption. Yeah. Many EU countries did not want Ukraine in the EU because of its corruption. Now, of course, that spells opportunity for Biden and his son. That's different.
That's sure.
But the countries of Europe know exactly how corrupt Ukraine is. There is no good guy in this conflict. It's very much like the Balkans. There's only bad and worse. You had the Serbians who were bad, you had the Bosnians who were bad, and you had the Kosovo Muslims who were worse. That is all you've got as a lesser of evils. Now, I feel very sorry for the Ukrainian people who are being decimated. I actually do. And I don't approve of what Putin is doing. But neither, however, do I see Mr. Zelensky as some righteous figure who Nancy Pelosi has called Churchillian. Like the church. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous.
He's actually has a citizen journalist sitting in a Ukraine prison. He won't let him go, but we keep sending money and begging for billions. I guess more to protect Ukrainian freedom. He's been against religious the religious figures there, imprisoning them if they don't agree with them. I understand the lesser of two evil aspect of it, but I think Ukraine will be part of maybe the worst part of it for me. David Lister, what do you think?
Well, for me, when I see Ukraine, who some of his army troops carry Black Sun flags and they're basically Nazis. We remember Ukraine was very involved in the sex trade of women and drugs, and every wicked thing is there. So they're not a good country that we want to rescue, but our country is so far deep in this thing now, it's almost looks like it's sparking a hot war instead of a cold war. Right. The Cold War is certainly putting a lot of money in people's pockets.
Yes.
Personally, politicians, things like that, and others. So, I have a choice between bad and bad.
Worse and worse. Now, what do you think of? We'll go back to Jacob. Jacob, the NATO plans, which we heard the head of NATO today. And he's talking about this is a NATO thing. Now, remember, first they said it's not a NATO thing. It's a Ukraine-Russia thing. Now he says, like many politicians, of course, they double down on their hypocrisy. He says, no, it is a NATO thing. And he's actually looking for 3.5 million troops to in the event of a direct war with Russia. Now, I don't know where they're going to get 3.5 million. Maybe some Finnish kids and some Swedish kids are going to join that with the newest addition to the NATO. But I'd see NATO being a very formidable aggressor, just as bad as Russia. All right, we'll go to Jay real quick. Jay, your thoughts? I mean, we've talked about offline Ukraine and all the stuff that's going on, but the fact that NATO is such an aggressor, I mean, they're saying, look, if Russia wants a war, they shouldn't have asked for this, is basically what he's saying. Now he's got NATO up the street with Sweden and Finland. What's your thoughts on NATO? I mean, they're the ones who are seemingly as aggressive as Russia.
Yeah, NATO is definitely trying to push this war into a hot war. That's and right. What we're seeing with the Ukraine is something that was seen in World War II.
No.
When you put children and you put older men on the front line, and you have something like what the Ukraine is doing, it's no longer a war. It becomes a slaughter. Yeah. And we rightfully called Adolf Hitler a monster for doing that. For putting children and old men on the front lines. We rightfully called Hirohito and the regime of Japan that was willing to sacrifice their civilian population for the war effort. These are all things that NATO is doing. They're doing the monstrous things that the Nazis and Imperial Japan did, and they're doing it for what? They're annihilating a country.
Yeah. But
for what? For freedom? I don't know. I mean, really, it doesn't make sense to me. It has come to a point where you have to have a negotiated settlement just for the survival of your people, for the welfare of the people.
They're bringing in everybody to the front lines. I mean, homosexual groups, LGBT groups are very upset that they're being called. Transgenders are being called to fight. Men, like you said, over 65 are called to fight. So
women nurses are being drafted to go to the front line, to be put in danger, let's say, to save people that are being injured. And NATO is causing this because they are emboldening Zelensky and backing him up with whatever he needs to do this.
Yeah, they're propping him up, and now they got to take the rug under. So maybe expect a rug pull here. Let's go to Davey real quick. Davey, in Australia and New Zealand, obviously in that area part of the world, we don't hear too much about their involvement in it. Obviously, they're part of the Five Eyes with the UK, with Canada, with the US. But what's the sentiment there of the scrimmage? It's so far away; it almost seems like it's in another world. But what is the sentiment there among Australians and New Zealanders and the government there?
Well, we don't really have the alternate news platforms here that exist in, the US and stuff like that. So there is a far more aggressive pro-Ukraine, anti-Russian sentiment. In fact, we've seen some pretty horrific things happen because of that. A young kid getting aggressively treated on a Q&A show on TV for daring to question the narrative, a Russian-born kid, kid, and got his very poorly treated. You do see homes flying Ukraine flags too. Most people here just buy what they're fed on the mainstream media, unfortunately, and that goes with everything.
It's the government there with Albanese. Is he formally just backing Ukraine? Has he taken a side? I mean, a lot of countries have not. A lot of countries are like,
you got no
say, not taking a side.
Tried that.
I must admit, look, when Albanese comes on a lot lately, it's pretty much like Dan Andrews. I kind of leave the room. My blood pressure goes up.
Here, I'm going to bring mine in. You can.
Oh man,
you can use it.
Yeah, it is interesting. There are countries that have not really bought into the war or taking sides, but we did have something interesting that happened. I think it affects a lot of the world. Is what Russia did. They halted gasoline and diesel. Gasoline and diesel. So it is reported that temporarily they're going to halt this, but you know what that means when the government says temporarily. Just ask Richard Nixon. And so the biggest seaborne exporter of diesel type fuel is halting it. I believe skyrocketing prices are going to go through the roof for diesel as well as obviously gasoline. Here in California, we'll pay a premium always. But this is going to affect many other countries that are perhaps even neutral at it. They're going to have to be, obviously affected by the price of gas, by the price of oil. I think barrel was $85 to $90 a barrel, soon to be $100. What is it over there, Jay? You're paying for on gasoline, diesel down in your area?
Yeah.
I'm at about $5.80 to $6, depending on if I'm in North Hollywood or Hollywood proper.
Yeah, it's definitely climbing over $6. It's definitely climbing over $6.
Great Britain and most of Europe is substantially higher than that.
Yeah, because you guys have
the Saudi Arabians are cashing in.
Yeah,
the Saudi Arabians who are responsible.
All right, Jacob, you're back. Good job. All right, so going back to the NATO thing, going back to they see Russia as the aggressor, but they themselves are the aggressors. They themselves do not want any peace. I mean, if they really were for peace, they would have drawn up the deal quite a long time ago. It is NATO 2.0, what they did in 91 with Yugoslavia. It's again the same thing, except Bill Clinton's not there. Another, let's say sexual deviant is there with Biden. And it's not Solana anymore, Javier Solana. It's another guy in NATO. But what's your thoughts on NATO? I know the U.S. pays quite a premium for that.
You're asking me?
Yes, since you're back, yeah.
Okay. First of all, we have to understand that there are select interests who are profiting from the war. We've already talked about American defense contractors. Also, Saudi Arabia has cut production. Saudi Arabia is very much doing quite well because of this war and because of its ramifications. They're basically doing what they've always done, putting a knife in the back of the Western countries, of the Christian countries. They have never had any shortage of friends in Washington, particularly the House of Bush. The Saudi Arabians shafting us. That's what happened. This was also aggravated by the failure to build the Keystone Pipeline and the other energy policies of the Biden regime, which you've just heard Gavin Newsom today demanding even less domestic production in the United States. Now, what is that going to do to the price of oil for the average American? What is that going to do? It's going to be something absolutely horrific. Don't just look at what's happening in the Ukraine. Look at what's happening in international commodity, particularly oil prices. Look at what's transpiring with grain prices, and look at what's transpiring in the energy costs, particularly in continental Europe. That is what undergirds what is happening. The unwillingness of the Ukraine to negotiate is not simply the fault of the Ukraine. It's the fault of Putin. Putin will only negotiate on the basis we get to keep what we've already taken. Now, you want to negotiate an end to the war? Let us keep what we've already taken. The Ukrainians are saying no. There is no good guy in this war. There is no good guy in this war. There are victims. Ukrainian people are victims, but there's no good guy.
Jacob, the Sergei Lavrov comments about blaming the U.S. as they're the ones who are basically handling all the Ukraine activity, inflicting strategic defeat to Russia is what they want. This is what he said. He said the U.S. is basically in control of Kiev. They're the ones basically calling for the aggression against Russia. And for many years, they have groomed this. This is obviously he's going back to the 2014 meddling elections with Obama, Rice, and Nuland. And he's coming out and said, look, they're giving billions of dollars to the Ukraine military, which obviously they really, it's been a terrible result. But when Lavrov says things like this, I don't think he's kidding. I don't think it's for show. I don't think it's for, headline news. I don't think it's to get kudos. I think there's some serious stuff there.
There is substance to what he says. But however, Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine did not invade Russia. Putin grabbed the Crimea in 2014. Ukrainian did not grab anything Russian. As far as the so-called election meddling, well, that is true. But it is also true that as Putin murdered Litvenko in London, he tried to murder the political leader in Ukraine. The guy's skin turned blue after Soviet intelligence tried to poison him, or succeeded in poisoning him. Again, there's no good guy. the Russians are trying to make themselves the victims. We're fighting Nazis. Okay, there is that element, but that element is not in eastern Ukraine that he's announced. The pro-Nazi element is in the far western Crusade, Ukraine, close to the Polish border. And secondly, if they were as powerful as Putin has claimed, they wouldn't have a Jewish president. Again, Putin is no righteous man. He's no righteous man. Don't look for a good guy in this conflict. It is very much, as you've said, like what happened in the former Yugoslav. There's no good guys, only bad guys and worse guys. There are victims, but there's no vanguard.
Back to Lavrov. I didn't want to get into the Putin stuff, but just what Lavrov said. He's not walking this back. The reason why I say that, many times when he speaks, Putin doesn't walk it back. If we look at it as a whole, this is a pretty damning statement that sounds like David had talked about a Cold War becoming a hot war, becoming a tactical war. I showed you that map of that NGO that's run by the UN. They wanted to break up the Russia Federation. Now, who knows? In reality, if this is a NATO plan, if this is a UN plan, if this is an American plan, but they seem to be ardent opponents of what Russia has become, the Federation. Jacob, any thought? We'll go to you first and then go to David. Any thought that they want to break up Russia? It's not that they want to break up Russia. They want to break up.
Putin's perspective, they lost the Warsaw Pact. Then they lost the CIS, the heir to the Soviet Union. They lost the Warsaw Pact. They lost the Soviet Union. Then they lost the CIS. What do they have to lose next? Russia itself. They've already had a civil war in Chechnya. There are other separatist movements in Russia. It is not monoethnic. It never really has been. That is what they are very much afraid of. Now, as far as the Western desire to break it up, well, I do not deny that. But it is still in response to Putin's own aggression to a degree. He is a cold warrior. He resents having lost the Cold War. That is a driving factor in what he does. I do not agree with the way this is being handled by NATO or by Biden, but the idea that we're backing an unrighteous Ukraine against a righteous Russia, there's nobody righteous. There is just no one that is righteous in this. But yes, they would like to fragment Russia. There's no question.
Yeah, it just seems crazy to me that, okay, you don't like what Putin's doing, so we're going to break up the entire country as a way of showing you we don't agree with you. That is just it's madness to it's going to create a war that no one's going to ever.
But let's understand that there's other factors. First of all, Russia is backing the Armenians because of Nagorno-Karabakh. The Russians are afraid of a second war taking place between Kazakhstan and Nagorno-Karabakh and with the Azerbaijanis. He's afraid of that. And he has a good reason to be. He also has taken a very aggressive policy in backing Syria's regime under Assad and has re-extended Soviet military presence into the Eastern Mediterranean. In the Sahel, sub-Saharan Africa, again, you had the Wagner Group all over the place getting control of these African juntas where there's mineral wealth. They're not just arbitrarily going after Russia because they don't like them. They're going after Russia because of the aggressions of Putin. He is trying to the extent possible to resurrect, not the Soviet Empire. He knows he can't do that, but certainly to resurrect Russia as a global player. That is what he's trying to do. He's doing it in Africa. He's doing it in Syria. He's doing it in Nagorno-Karabakh, and he's doing it in the Ukraine. That is what it comes to. He's not a good guy. There is no good guy.
Yeah, I think the globalists don't like what he's doing, and so they're going to try to fragment it. David Lister, you're back.
Yeah. Hopefully. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I guess I am back.
Yeah. Look, I got to ask you a question real quick before you start.
Okay, go ahead.
The question I want to know is, we watched the speech of Voldemort, Zelensky, and climate change in order to go after Russia? Really?
That's right.
Their excuse to invade it?
Absurd.
This is bizarre, ridiculous, beyond belief. I mean, I'm not saying Russia's the good guys Jacob's talking about, but they're not using climate change to go and destroy another country.
That was his argument. He was equating Putin's aggressions with climate change.
Yeah.
That is the kind of sleazeball you're dealing with in Zelensky. He's not Churchillian. He's not anything like a Churchillian. He's a sleazeball.
So when they blew up the pipeline between Russia and Germany, that helped the environment, really.
Kissinger said that the Ukraine did that.
Yeah.
It was not the Americans or British or NATO. It was or Russia.
I know.
It was Ukraine.
I didn't even know Kissinger was still alive, but he might as well look like he's beyond the grave now. David Lipson, back to you.
Yeah, Kissinger, I believe, is about 98. So, and he's still advising. Yes. But the thing with Zelensky going into the climate change, look, there is a lot of money out there for this sort of thing. So because he's now becoming desperate, Poland has now stopped funding him. They were first in, first out. He knows that more is coming down the pike of rejecting him. So why not jump in bed with whoever you can? And if it's the climate people, you'll do that. All you have to do is stop the war, and then we'll have better climate. But this whole thing is just running on profits. From Smedley Butler to Dwight Eisenhower warned about the defense industrial complex. The Democrats love wars, and so war is something that it makes profit for old men and is paid in young men's blood. And this is what's happening here, is just constant war for money to keep flowing all over the world. We even now see that 25 billion is going into the International Monetary Fund that could be going into this. Well, usually that money goes to Clinton and he distributes to other people. So we'll see how that goes. But
maybe they should ask Marina Abramovich donate some money to the Zelensky orphanage. I'm sure that's.
I agree with what David said. And I also agree with what Marco said about the globalists not approving of Putin's policies. Absolutely, the World Economic Forum are at odds with Putin's actions. This is for sure. What David said is also for sure. But let's not forget the other major factor. Who is benefiting, not just in the West, like Raytheon and defense contractors? Who is benefiting in the East?
Yep.
Russia is selling oil, natural gas to China and India at a discount. It is not refined oil. It is crude. India and China can both have a refining capacity. They can refine their own oil. So they're getting it discounted and they're not getting the high price refined oil. Thirdly, they're paying for it in Indian rupees and in Chinese yuan. What's Putin going to do with that kind of money? China is benefiting from this, and India is certainly benefiting from it. Look at the ruble. Russians are not giving accurate statistics for obvious reasons. They're fudging the figures about the trade and so forth. But look at their currency. Look at the ruble. They've just raised interest rates to 13%. 13%, because the ruble is worth 1 US penny or less. This is troubling them. No matter what certain people say, Russia is being hit internally. I know people are trying to deny that, not just the Russians, there's people in the West trying to deny it as well. But Russia is being hit. Look at the currency. That is something they cannot lie about or control. Yeah. The ruble is in trouble. They're having to raise interest rates. Look at who is benefiting. We know who's benefiting in the West. Who's benefiting in the East? India and China. It's a bigger game.
Yeah.
But even in the Middle East, there's great benefits. We saw that Saudi Arabia said their country is growing at 20%. The UAE is now looking like they're going to get F-35 fighters. the expansion of war is everywhere. So
Absolutely.
whoever sells
Yeah.
F-35s, hey, they're going to be making money. Raytheon. And
We have to remember how much natural gas Qatar has. Qatar and Iran together produce as much natural gas as Russia does, easily.
Yeah. Don't forget Azerbaijan, too.
Azerbaijan. The United States, I think, is fourth.
Yeah. Jacob, real quick, I want a couple of things, and then we'll go back to David real quick. It's this mentality. Do you agree with this mentality? We can push Russia. We can push Russia because Russia wouldn't dare attack NATO. This is the mentality. Do you agree with that mentality?
They threatened Britain. They threatened Britain the week before last.
Yeah.
Will they do it lightly? They know if they did anything nuclear towards NATO, it would be back to the old MAD game, mutually assured destruction. But that's not to say they would not use tactical nuclear weapons against the Ukraine. That is a more plausible fear.
Yeah,
absolutely. So there is that issue, and there is that element. But again, desperate people do desperate things.
North Korea is involved.
Yes, and Iran. Now Iran and North Korea are both involved.
It's escalating. Now, I want to ask you real quick before we go to David, is Erdogan. Here's a guy that sits in the middle. Now, he sits in Turkey, obviously Asia Minor, a lot of biblical history there. A lot of the New Testament was written there. It's a big part of Christianity in its past. Here's Erdogan sitting on both sides. He's friends with Russia. He wants to be EU. He's NATO, but he's pro-East. What do you make of it? Is he the biggest?
We have to understand something, that the conflict in Devore Karabakh is not getting a lot of publicity in the United States or in Europe or Britain. It's not getting a lot of media attention, but it's getting a lot of media attention in Turkey. It's getting a lot of media attention in the Middle East.
Yeah, we talked about it here.
The Azerbaijanis are ethnic Turks. They're ethnically Turkish, like Australians are Anglo-Celtic, or not the Wogs as they call them, but the traditional Aussies are Anglo-Celtic. Well, so too those people in the Nagorno-Karabakh, they are ethnic Turks. There are two places where Erdogan and Putin are in conflict. One, they support rivals in Syria. They're at odds in Syria, and the other is now in the Nagorno-Karabakh.
Big problem.
Russia is backing the Armenians. Yeah. Not that the Armenians have any great love for the Russians, but you can't be choosy when you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Who your friends are going to be.
Wouldn't Turkey be in trouble because of their economy? Erdogan is driving it into the toilet.
Yes. See, Turkey has a weapon that it's never used since World War I. And that weapon is the Dardanelles and the Bosporus.
Yep.
That's the weapon it's not used.
Yeah. Is he, David, is he burning the candle at both ends? Is he, is he a pro-Europe or pro-Russia?
Whatever horse he can ride on, he's going to ride on it, because
he might
has to
against each other. Yeah.
He's just trying to act like he's some master politician to bring about whatever his intentions are, but his intentions is probably trying to keep his head on his shoulders. He's not a well-liked man. Even in Turkey, his popularity's gone down as people are suffering greatly in the economy. And but Europe fears him because he says he can release millions of Muslims into
That's
Europe.
Correct.
Yep.
He has a weapon he can use against Europe with Islamic immigration, Arab immigration. The other thing is, even apart from Ukraine, even if there was no war in Ukraine, the Turkish economy would be in serious trouble. Serious trouble. Another thing we should point out is this. Now, I do not personally plan on voting for Mr. Trump again for certain reasons. With the gay thing in Mar-a-Lago, and because now he's liberalized his position on abortion just this week. That's another reason. However, had he been the president, had he been in the Oval Office, this war would not have happened.
I agree. Real quick before we move on, we talked about the economies. Governments now are calling for price control in the West, now specifically Canada and the U.S. That's the ones I want to focus on, Canada and the U.S. Not so much in the U.K., although France, Germany, they have some economic problems. But last month it was surreal. It was the Bidenomics, that they call it. That says inflation is just about over. We just kind of get this done, and people are happy because they have jobs and they have money. And you see the pundits going on CNN saying people should be grateful for having an economy like this. But inflation is not over. CPI is a mess here. And now they're calling for price control. So on the one hand, they're saying the economy is great. On the other hand, they're saying, well, the Inflation Act, reduce the Inflation Act, we need to start moving into price control. Canada is moving into that. Jacob, real quick, you remember the price controls of Nixon and
Yes.
of course, Carter. And how did those work out? And what exactly do they want to do with the price control?
Well, what it amounts to is what it amounted to under Nixon, a wage price freeze. You put a lid on top of the cauldron that's boiling, and then you turn up the gas. You turn up the heat, but keep the lid on top. That's what it comes to. Unless you're going into a reduction of fiscal debt, you're only going to make you're going to make a bad situation worse in the long run for the sake of temporary political relief before an election or something. That's what that comes to. Now, Paul Kluger, who's been saying these kind of things, the financial editor of the New York Times, he got the Nobel Prize for idiocy. I know people got Nobel Prize for physics, for chemistry, for medicine, for economics. That man got the Nobel Prize for idiocy. He did. David will tell you. What statistic is it, David? 61% of American families are living paycheck to paycheck?
Yeah, that's correct.
Maxing out on credit cards is at a near all-time high in the United States?
Yep.
Okay. And food prices have gone up 20% since Biden was elected.
20 to 50%, Jacob. 20 to 50%, depending
20
on
to
the
50, okay.
Yeah.
I'm coming down on the say 20 to 50. And that's not counting oil.
No.
Yet there are still enough stupid people who watch things like The View, and they'll listen to Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar, and they'll believe it. There's people who are more than happy to sign their own death warrant. All you have to do is give them a pen. They're called students, liberal Jews, blacks, and suburban housewives with nothing better to do than to watch Sonny Hostin on television.
So Executive Order 11615, that was Richard Nixon's 1971, the Economic Stabilization Act. What happened at that point, Jake? I mean, why did it, we know why it would fail, but what did it do to prices?
First of all, we have to understand that it and its ramifications extended beyond 71 into 73 when you had the oil embargo during the Yom Kippur War.
Yeah. That
aggravated it. Let's also remember that there was a virtual defaulting upon the dollar. Because France was taking the gold bullion. That also was part and parcel of it. But what I said was, you've got a pot on a stove boiling over, you put a lid on it and hold the lid and turn up the gas at the same time. That is what that kind of wage price controls achieve. You're going to make, for the sake of a short-term gain, you're going to make a more dangerous longer-term situation.
Volcker had to put the interest rate at 20%, just what Carter did and what
because
Ford.
Of Carter. You had double-digit inflation that was out of control under Carter.
Yeah. And if you look at the M2 supply, money supply, it is greater than it's ever been. How in the world are you going to get that under control? And of course, Canada, Trudeau is meeting with the housing minister and I don't even call it the food minister, but it would just be a bunch of grocery store CEOs and telling them that they need on the one hand, you need to upgrade your profits. On the other hand, you need to bring down your prices because you can't charge them too much. There's a price control on groceries. It's called the Competition Act to enhance competition across the economy. I love how they name them things that absolutely have nothing to do.
What becomes the inevitable result of that? Two things. One, shortages at supermarkets, grocery shops, shortages. Two, black markets. Those are the two automatic consequences of those policies if pursued for any period of time.
Now, one of the things he floated, this is Trudeau in Canada, is that the government can control these stores and provide some relief to obviously the grocery stores in order for them to continue to survive. Isn't that similar to what Brandon Johnson wants to do in Chicago?
Precisely. Another version of the same thing. What you are having, because of the policies in Chicago of Kim Foxx, one of these Soros-funded district attorneys who are pro-crime, and who will not prosecute criminals and who will tie the hand of the police. When you legalize shoplifting, when you legalize theft, when you legalize smash and grab, this is what they've done. This is what they basically legalized it. People know they can do these things with impunity. Stores close down. Walmart's closed down. Other chains closed down. Supermarkets closed down. So now they have what they call a food desert. Oh, the minorities and blacks are being victimized. You're turning our neighborhoods into food deserts. No, Kim Foxx is turning your neighborhood into food desert. Brad Johnson, Lori Lightfoot, I'm turning your neighborhoods into food deserts because you voted for them. You got what you voted for. It's a direct result of your own actions and of the people you elected. That's the food desert. You're actually saying, if you don't continue to operate a business at a loss and agree to be robbed and agree for your employees to be assaulted in some cases, intimidated, your customers to have their cars broken into, if you don't agree to that, you're a racist. That's what it comes to. So what are you going to have? You're going to have grocery shops, if he has his way, owned by the city, owned by local government. Where people with Obama food stamps from the food stamp president, who gave people food stamps instead of jobs, Obama's food stamps, you take those and you go from the government and you go into a shop owned by the government. That's not just socialism. That is communism. That is Sovietism, virtually.
Soviet-style
Now,
store.
what happened in the Soviet Union? Long lines, shortages, corruption, black markets. Don't think it can't happen in Chicago and other cities that elect Democrats. It can and it will. There are certain laws of physics. Buoyancy. There's a law of buoyancy. There's a law of gravity. Economics is the same thing. It's mathematically demonstrable. There are certain laws of supply and demand. If you begin to interfere with the natural economic forces, it's no different than interfering with natural forces of physics. There's going to be a ramification. For every action, there will always be an equal and opposite reaction. That is not only true in physics and chemistry, it is in physical science, it is true in economics. For every action, there will be an equal and opposite reaction. And it will not stop the theft and the crime. It will not stop the theft and the crime. If anything, it may increase it.
I remember as a kid living in Nicaragua exactly the same way. Soviet-style type stores. The government controlled it. You got a little card. You went in there. You got it. If there was any, usually it was ransacked by the time you got there. And now, nobody could, Jacob, nobody could imagine, David, listen, no one can imagine this could happen in the West. It can only happen over there. David, can it happen?
Absolutely, it could happen. We know eventually the world's coming to a state where a day's work will be exchanged for a day's food. And
one person.
And so, for one person. So it's coming like this. And the Marxism that has infiltrated America in our education system, all these systems have created people that don't actually understand American capitalism. Like for Moriel, we know that you can give out paper making kit and candle making kits to women in KwaZulu-Natal, and all of a sudden they're capitalists and their lives are improving, and it works. But now that you interfere, I mean, like the government creates these depressions, they create these recessions, and now they're trying to fix a recession by tamping down, raising interest rates and destroying home sales. and it's only going to create more inflation. And then what we saw a couple of weeks ago up in Canada, milk is being controlled by the Canadian government. They pour it out, and then they charge people $7 a liter. Some of this you're already seeing happening. From what I remember, Jay said like milk's $9 a gallon out there.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's crazy, man. Come to Tennessee. It's $3.50. What's different? I mean, people are working hard, and the government of Tennessee is not as controlling. They allow the free markets to operate. And the Tennessee, they're getting ready to build true local beef, which is going to be a place in Tennessee where local farmers can send their sort of near sourcing. They're going to send their beef, stay in Tennessee and in the surrounding areas, and have ample supply of beef. So
there's another aspect of this that people are not looking at.
Go ahead.
Very few people look at it, and it's very significant. Martial law. You take an American military base, either in the United States or abroad. Okay. Now I'm based in England. There are American Air Force bases where American military families live, adjacent to or on the bases. Germany the same. They're still there in NATO. Okay. You can go not with euros or with British pounds. You can pay in U.S. dollars. You're not affected by inflation. You pay American prices for subsidized items at a PX, post exchange. Same here in the United States. You go to a military base. The base commander is like the mayor. The commander of the military police is the chief of police. The chief medical officer is the hospital administrator. Everything is run by the government on a military base. Okay. Right. You want to buy something, you go to the PX and you'll get a better price than you will off base. Okay. There's a reason they're taking a woke racist. I would say the man is a woke racist. This CQ Brown, making him the replacement for Miley as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's a woke racist. He believes in this stuff. He doesn't believe in military promotion by merit. He believes in military promotion by inclusivism. Now, of course, our enemies laugh at this, and then it shows American weakness to China and so forth. But that is his mentality. What they are trying to do is take an economic system of healthcare, of police, of commerce that exists on military bases for military families and make it a norm. In other words, it becomes a police state.
Yeah, pretty much.
That is what they're thinking. That is why you've got Brown as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in part. And I'm sorry to say that 29 Republicans voted for that woke racist. 29 Republican rhinos voted for him.
One thing that I wanted to mention real quick before we get into it, because I don't want to get stuck in the same subject, is the stagflation trap that is going to lead to universal income, UBI. This is the ultimate part of it. Helicopter money, food rationing, and of course, the ultimate thing is what the government has been planning on doing and wants to do to get the public to accept not only UBI, but UBI as a CBDC, where you have no other choice. You want to get some food, you want to go to the grocery store. Well, they're only taking this. They're only going to take this. Central bank digital currency, because that's what the government is backing. Helicopter money and UBI and CBDC. I could see it. I could see that it's a very possible scenario with these, uncontrolled economies where people are going to have to force to do it. And Jacob, you know where that's going.
Of course we do.
Yeah.
Well, as Christians, we understand where it's all going. Revelation 13.
Exactly right. And so these are not isolated events. They're linked together. And the scriptures are always right. The scriptures are always going to point to the inevitable. Yeah. So, David, I don't know if you had your hand up real quick. Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Let's finish this off.
It was interesting. I was watching on one of the business networks last week. One of the ex-Fed guys came on. His last name's Connor. And what he said is one of the problems that we're having, and he's not on the uh, the Biden administration's plan. He said that the rapidization change to green energy is one of the problems that we're having with our economy, and that we need more fossil fuels now because the government's plan to switch over in 5 to 7 years is entirely unrealistic, because he said it will take 25 to 30 years to do. And he said that the problems that are being imported into the economy is what's bringing a recession. He believes there's going to be a pretty good recession. And Bidenomics, this is just typical of politicians talking away problems that never go away. That's right.
That's right. Now, you speak of the feds. Well, the U.S. Treasury Department, Janet Yellen, $33 trillion in debt. That's the national debt, $33 trillion and counting. She says it's sustainable. You got guys on CNN saying the economy is great. I mean, people swallow this. And I mean, who actually would believe it except for maybe, people like, Paul Krugman. But 33 trillion is sustainable? Jacob, it has to collapse at some point. You can't just keep at it. You can't just keep.
Yes, but see what they're looking at is relativism, because the debt in China per capita is higher. Right. Local government debt, corporate debt is twice that of America. Because China has a bigger debt, or because of the economic situation in the European Union and now Britain, because other countries are in worse shape. We're sustainable just because other people are in worse shape than we are.
Yeah.
That is part of her mentality. She's a very silly woman. She's always been a ridiculous, silly woman, just a political appointee who doesn't really know anything. I remember when inflation went up under Biden, within the first several months, she said, "We miscalculated." That's what she said. She's just a silly old lady. Yeah. She's just a silly woman who doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
So I have to tell you, Marco, some CNN, some of their reporters on the economic front are slamming Bidenomics and are starting to see it because
I guess that's why they had to bring all these other guys saying that it was great.
Yeah,
like it's yeah.
So it's not great, and the problem is going to only get worse. This is why Trump seems to be doing good as someone that can fix it, but that's even questionable for the future.
I don't want to get too much into China, but yes, companies in the United States are pulling back out of China. Things are not going well in China. Wall Street's losing big on Chinese investment. Big. What's that company? Sounds like a spring. What was the name of it?
Garden.
Spring Garden, something Garden.
Yeah, something like yes. They're bigger than Evergrande.
Yeah, bigger. I mean, it'll be rippled effect throughout the entire
Country
world.
Garden. Country Garden.
It is Country Garden. I always think of like a nice little tea. Country Garden out in the.
Ain't no green in that garden.
No, it is absolutely a mess, and a lot of companies, U.S. companies, are absolutely losing big. They're backed out of it. We'll talk about it next week because I did want to talk about the other side of the economy that is going to, probably implode faster than that, and that is the shocking reports of what's going on in the Darien Gap, going up to Central America, into Mexico, into the U.S. Same thing's happening in Europe, but in a different way. Biden is blaming the Republicans. Who actually is going to believe that? Undermining border security. But 6,000 male Africans showed up in Italy's Lampedusa island, double the population in one day. Now the government says we're just going to sprinkle them into Italy and in Europe, here through the Darien Gap, down in Colombia, Panama, going up to Mexico. It is literally Texas calling for an emergency. Texas is calling for an emergency because they call it an invasion. Here it is. Texas declares invasion as Biden secretly flies in migrants into different states and in Texas included. So, Jacob, as a whole, this is not a U.S. problem. It's not just a UK problem. It's not just a Europe problem. It is a problem worldwide.
Absolutely.
From the South.
Well, first of all, just looking at it geopolitically, first of all, or just in the United States politically, we've got to understand that Mayorkas and Biden are doing this deliberately. They're trying to turn red states blue, places like Texas and Florida and so forth. That is part of the reason they are doing it. And it proves they don't care about Hispanic Americans or Black Americans who are going to be displaced out of job opportunities because of it. And they certainly don't care about the middle class who are going to be taxed to fund it. They don't care about that. They don't care about the fentanyl or the crime or the fact that there are narco-terrorists and terrorists crossing the border. They just don't care. It means absolutely nothing to them. That is true. However, looking at it geopolitically in light of Scripture, it always comes back to what Daniel said. The conflict will be between the kings of the north and the kings of the south. That is taking place in North America, and it is taking place in Europe, in Britain, in Sweden. There it is more serious because a lot of the people coming from Africa are Muslims, and a lot of the people coming from the Middle East are Muslims, radicals among them. They want to escape the stinking camel urine Muslim world, which I can understand, but they want to bring the camel urine with them into the civilized world and complain about anti-Islamic bias and Islamophobia and to try to force their Islam and respect our Quran and all this kind of stuff. Well, if that's what you want, why did you leave the Muslim world? But you're not allowed to say that because it's the truth.
David, real quick before we get into the Canada thing, the Biden is actually non-caring about the border, never visits the border, all that stuff. But it's the same thing with European politicians. You had this lady in Italy, Giorgia Meloni, who was supposed to be the darling of the Italian, the newer European Renaissance, that she's not going to allow migrants. All of a sudden now she's sprinkled them in all through Europe and Italy and more to come. Are they just busting Italy because of their stands like Bulgaria and Hungary and what was the other country? And I think those are the ones who stood up against the EU and says, no, we don't want migrants here.
Well, she said she was going to fix the problem, but of course, when you have worldwide the Soros Foundation, Open Society Foundation that are funneling all this in there, there's not a lot she can do to stop it. She can't roll out the army.
Right. Yeah.
She can't, there's nothing she can do. So she just bows to the pressure, just as everybody is just bowing to the pressure. They're just ultimately trying to destroy all Western economies. And
it's not just a globalist agenda.
Yeah.
Once you're in the EU, as Italy is, as Ireland is, as France is, you cannot have ultimate sovereign control over interest rates. You cannot have ultimate sovereign control over foreign and defense policy. And you cannot have ultimate final control over environmental policy. Wow. And you cannot have ultimate control over immigration policy. Those decisions are made by unelected socialist bureaucrats in Brussels.
Yeah.
All your own politicians can do is rubber stamp what's decided by the powers that be.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned Italy, France, Ireland, all have problems, immigration problems. Obviously, France probably the worst. Italy is feeling the ramifications of that, and there's nothing anybody can do. But you're right, Jacob, Daniel too, and there's a conflict coming, and it's here, and we're dealing with it. We need to trust in Jesus. But you mentioned that they're not allowed to say anything. You're not allowed to say anything. But here's the anti-grooming protests in Canada. Parents speak out against the transgender propaganda in the schools. It's a big protest. It's a million march for children. That's what they call it in Toronto, Ottawa, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, Montreal, and beyond. Very peaceful. Now, there's an anti-protest, basically a counter-protest against them. As Canadians say no to gender identity ideology in schools, there's a great movement of LGBT against those protests. There's Muslims with Christians trying to fight against the LGBT, which the LGBT, by the way, feels betrayed by the Muslim community because they're the ones who brought him in and voted for more immigration. Now they don't like it because the Muslims are not liking them. And so it's a big mess. But ultimately, it's multiculturalism having its wonderful fruits. It's anti-grooming protests, but there's a counter protest. basically they're saying that we just want to, basically groom your kids and get over that. That's really what they're saying, aren't they? Parents, you have no rights to protest against what we're going to do to your children.
That's what they're saying. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the valleys and the inhabitants of the cities, what grew on the ground. That's what happened then. And that is what is going to happen in the future, and probably the not too distant future. What a wonderful day that will be. Let me read further. Romans chapter 1. In the same way, men also abandon the natural function of the woman and burden their desire towards one another, men with men committing indecent acts and receiving in their own persons the dual penalty of their error. They did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, so God gave them over to a depraved mind to do things which are not proper, that is, what are not natural. We also read the same thing is true. God gave them over to degrading passions. The women exchanged the natural function for that which is unnatural, and in the same way also the men. It is the nature of a woman to protect her children. These women are wanting to give children over. Well, they can give the children over, but what they cannot do is prevent God from giving them over. They will give the children over, but God will give them over. They can outlaw the Bible as hate speech, or they can get an inclusive Bible and redact it or rewrite it along the lines of what they want to believe. It doesn't matter. God's word is God's word. The reason these people are becoming so aggressive and assertive and arrogant is because God has given them over to this perversion. When you go after children, we are told it's better for a millstone to be tied around your neck. These people have nowhere to go but hell. And I find it, while God is wanting none to perish, I'd rather these people repent and be saved. If God has given them over to it, they're not going to repent and be saved. They will have nowhere to go but hell. And I can't say I feel sorry for them.
The effect of it, obviously, I don't think Trudeau has ever read that part of the Bible. So that's something he's completely willfully unaware and unwilling to deal with it. And I guess his popularity is not that good right now. But anyway, I think he's going to remain in power just because of the things he's done in Parliament there. Let's go to the final topic, Jacob, before we go. And you mentioned that you can't say anything. And this is exactly what the world is coming to. The censorship is very much tying its noose around pretty much everybody. Free speech is just about over. It's an illusion in a lot of places. They say it is, but it's not real. And here's one example. Here's a man who is not a conservative by any means whatsoever, Russell Brand in the UK. And he was censored. He was deplatformed for his stands on the war, on CBDCs, on what's going on with the children, what's going on with medicine from the government. And the UK government pressured Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, I guess Twitter, we call it X now, to take him off, deplatform him, take away his any income that he gets from it. And but they blamed him to be a high far right conservative. They almost blamed him and they painted him like Nigel Farage. He's nothing like that. But this one MP, I don't even know what part of the UK she's from. But her name is Dame Caroline Denege. I don't know how to pronounce it. And she's sponsored by Google, of course, and she's going after them. But are we seeing the last of any free speech that's going to be tolerated in this world?
It'll happen in Britain faster than America because there is no First Amendment. So they'll set the precedent in Britain. But yes, they're going after free speech. The government has already been doing it by the corrupt Justice Department and the FBI, going in collaboration with social media and Silicon Valley to censor people. Things the government couldn't do themselves, they're getting private companies to do it. And liberal politicians have threatened companies with legislation if they don't do it. So, yes, free speech is absolutely going, and ultimately Satan's target will be to suppress the preaching of the gospel. That is absolutely true. But Russell Brand was a left-wing activist. He was a Jeremy Corbyn left-wing activist. Now he's a right-wing extremist. Notice the way the game is played. This past week, Senator Ted Cruz was questioning Biden's female administrator of federal prisons. And he was asking, how many women have been assaulted in prison? How many female prisoners have been assaulted in prison by transgender males? She wouldn't answer. They don't care about women. They don't care one bit about women. They don't care about blacks. They don't care about anybody but themselves. They'll turn against each other. They'll turn against a lefty who does not toe the party line. Right. Look at Robert Kennedy. The Kennedy family were iconic in the Democratic Party. They hate him. They despise Robert Kennedy's son because he's a threat to the establishment. They'll turn against their own kind. You toe the party line or you're in trouble, just like the Soviet Union. Party members who didn't toe the party line would be expunged. Well, that is what they are doing in the United States and in the United Kingdom. Increasingly, other countries, certainly Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the English-speaking democracies are not in any way immune. That is what it is coming to.
David, what do you think? I mean, the free speech is, I think Jacob's absolutely right. It's about over. First speech, First Amendment here. It doesn't begin with free speech, but the right to practice your religion, the right to practice your worship, obviously, speaking of the Christian faith, that's evaporating along with the First Amendment.
Yep. And another, there's very famous, the Texas Attorney General, Mr. Paxson, was found not guilty on 16 counts of his impeachment, yet now the Biden administration has come after him. Why are they coming after this man? He says he knows 100% why the Democrats are cheating and how they're cheating with mail-in ballots. And so they're after him because they need to shut it down. But also to shut down, it's important for them to shut down the Christian religion, because Christian religion is the major holdback for allowing Marxism to come in and take over the country. The way that the Republicans and Democrats both have allowed technocracy to come into our very lives, to be able to change our language, to be able to define a man as something else. And so we're losing the battle day by day. And if you can change the language, you can take away your right to speak. You can take away your right to believe. You can take away your right to assembly. Remember what happened in Canada. They froze their bank account. They were no longer allowed to assemble. Yep. The whole First Amendment and the other amendments are under siege right now.
Yeah.
Look at the last 2 weeks very briefly. Just the last 2 weeks. That a 12-year-old kid, tired of being force-fed transgenderism in the classroom by a teacher and by the school board, tired of being force-fed it, comes into school with a T-shirt, there are two genders. Yeah. He doesn't have freedom of speech. They throw him out of school. He goes to court. The court rules against him. Now it's going to be appealed in a federal appellate court. A federal judge ruled against him. Now that judge should die in Alcatraz. We should open Alcatraz just for these judges and leave them there to die in order to defend the Constitution. This is a 12-year-old kid. He doesn't have freedom of speech. You have to toe the official agenda that is forced down the children's throats and allow your kids to be indoctrinated. Let's just look. Federal prosecutions of Texas state government officials because they're protecting their borders. The federal government says, we're not going to protect the borders. State says, okay, we'll protect it ourselves. No, you can't do that. That's constitutionally a federal responsibility. Yeah, but you're not doing it. So what? You can't do it. You have a police, I think it was a sergeant, who should have been indicted. He should have been indicted for shooting that unarmed woman who was a military veteran inside the Capitol. The films show the police even opening doors and allowing the protesters to walk through the corridors inside the Capitol. And all of a sudden, it was an attempted coup. Open lie. The films show it was a lie. They just made that guy a police captain or something last week. He should be under indictment. And he gets a promotion.
Yeah.
Bye-bye democracy. Thank God there's a new world coming.
Yes. Amen.
Jacob, what do you think about Garland going before Congress on Wednesday and invoking the Holocaust because his family's Jewish? That this is a Holocaust against him. They're going after him because he's Jewish, because his political opponents are anti-Semitic. I mean,
that's it. If you say something about Obama, that makes you a racist. If you say something about Garland, that makes you an anti-Semite. That's the card they always play.
Unbelievable.
Okay, so let me see. Is Ben Shapiro an Orthodox Jew? Is he anti-Semitic? Is Dennis Prager anti-Semitic? Is David Horowitz anti-Semitic? Is Mark Levin anti-Semitic? I know plenty of Jews who lost family in the Holocaust, my wife's family among them. Most of them wiped out. They don't agree with Garland. Are they anti-Semitic? They will always play that card. Jackie Mason knew that. Jackie Mason, the quintessential Jewish comedian, who was brilliant. I met him and talked to him a few times. He had no respect whatsoever for what became of the Anti-Defamation League. He knew they played that game.
Yeah, Garland.
There are blacks. Candace Owen will tell you. They play that game. Oh, you're against Biden? Why you don't like Irish people? You don't like, what are you, anti-Semitic? Or you don't like Obama? Or you must be a racist. They will always play that. Well, first of all, how could a Democrat be in a party that is rife with anti-Semitism, that has people like Olmert in it, and Tliab in it, and Ellis in it? If there's anti-Semitism, it's in the Democratic Party. That's the party of Garland.
Yeah, Merrick Garland choked up while talking about his ancestors and how they're going after him just like his ancestors were. Now, Garland's been anti-Christian without a doubt. But now
even anti-Catholic, even anti-Roman Catholic.
Absolutely, yeah, and anti-parents. If you protest the curriculum in the schools, but this is our world. This is what's become of that. Just winding down a little bit here. We're going to go into backstage in just a few minutes, and we're going to be talking about the rapture. Now that we got Jacob all riled up, Jacob, you ready for Rapture Mania?
Let's do it.
Mania. You might not make it back to the UK. Remember that.
That's right. J.D. Farag and those guys are right. I might not make it back to England. I might be raptured.
Yeah, so you better get to do whatever you need to do now.
Yeah.
And we'll appreciate you watching. And we're going to backstage. We're not going to be on YouTube. We're not going to be on Facebook. We're going to be on the other ones, like Rumble, which, by the way, Rumble stood up against the UK Parliament. And
David, can you book me an airline ticket to don't let Moriel pay for it. I have to pay for it. Book me an airline ticket to Antarctica. I always wanted to see the penguins. It's on my bucket list, and I want to make sure I do it before the rapture that's coming on the 25th.
But that's Sunday, so you're not.
Oh boy! Well, J.D. Farag says I better get this stuff done before then, so I want to go down and see the penguins. Can you work it out for me?
Well, you got to get to Antarctica and you got to have a trip. And being that this is the end of season, I don't know if they would actually have anybody get you there. Maybe if you get to New Zealand, you can fly that plane to go over there.
Yeah, from Christchurch. But it's on my bucket list. I've seen that plane, but it's on my bucket list.
Yeah, let's save the bucket list for the backstage. So appreciate you watching. We're going to be on Rumble. We're going to be on Vimeo. We're going to be on, of course, Moriel.tv, MorielTV.org. We're going to be on Telegram, RTN. And we're not going to be on YouTube and Facebook, so they won't let us talk about this stuff, and neither should we approve of them censoring anybody. But I like what Rumble did. They stood up to the UK Parliament and they said, go take a hike, as the Americans say here, go take a hike.
It's not an accusation.
It's a conservative government in Britain.
Yeah.
It's not the Labour Party. If these are the conservatives, what would Labour be?
I don't even want to know.
And I'd just like to mention real quick, that
go ahead.
none of the allegations against against Russell Brand have been substantiated. They are just this. They are an allegation. They're not proven, but on an allegation, you're to be censored. So keep that in mind.
From Hawaii said, a woman has a right to be believed just because she's a woman. You're automatically guilty if you're a male.
It's too bad that didn't fucking Biden. He would have been out the window. But anyway.
I was about to say, why can't we cancel Biden? He's got a lot of allegations against him.
Quite a bit of stuff.
Even his own daughter's diary was quite. She was afraid to take showers till late night. When he was
David, you can't talk about that here. Censorship. They're going to come out.
Sorry about that.
I did like what Rumble did. You're going to have to edit that part. I like what Rumble did. And they stood up against it. They stood up against Macron. They stood up. So I say if you go to Rumble, you're probably in good shape. We're going to be there in a few minutes. We're going to take questions there. So see you guys in just a few minutes.
Hello, and thank you for watching Moriel TV. There are so many things that are happening at Moriel Ministries worldwide, from the Philippines to Japan to India to Africa and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.